at the end of Prohibition, like I mentioned, Luciano and Lansky organized crime, set up the commission. The newly appointed prosecutor in New York, U.S. Attorney, Thomas Dewey, comes in, and he wants to clean up the rackets in New York. Now, at the time, numerically, the majority of the gangsters were Jewish. So Dewey went after many of the Jewish gangsters. One of the gangsters he went after was Dutch Schultz. Dutch Schultz was not happy with that, and he was kind of a loose cannon himself. So he wanted to put a hit on Thomas Dewey. Luciano nixed it. He said, no, we don't do that. And that was pretty hard and fast rule that the mob had. You didn't go after prosecutors, you didn't go after judges, you didn't go after cops, and you didn't go after journalists. That was pretty much set in stone that the mob pretty much adhered to. So Luciano said, no, you're not doing that. But Luciano didn't trust Schultz. So Luciano put a hit on Schultz. Schultz was gunned down in New Jersey. But after Dewey was finished with that level, then he went out, now he's going after Luciano. And basically he prosecutes Luciano and convicts him on prostitution, running a prostitution ring. Luciano pretty much got railroaded in that because, yeah, he was involved in it, but the laws that they used to prosecute Luciano didn't exist yet, but they went forward with prosecuting him anyway. So he got 50 years, 30 to 50 years. He was up at Sing Sing up in New York. So that's that. Luciano was taken, but he's still kind of in control. They still, Lansky still keeps in touch with him. They still considered him the boss, the head guy. So what happened was World War II breaks out. So when World War II breaks out, New York City becomes a jumping off point for all munitions and troops heading to Europe. So the American government seizes a French ocean liner called the Normandy. And they seized it from the Vichy French, who were allied with Hitler at the time. So they seized it from Vichy France. So they bring it to New York, into New York Harbor, and they're going to retrofit it for the war effort. It's going to carry, 100,000 troops, all the munitions and everything. A fire breaks out on the ship, and so they call all the fire equipment and everybody, and they just pour water into the ship. They poured so much water in the ship that they actually sunk it. It tipped over. But an investigation, the official investigation was that it was greasy rags were ignited by some welder's torch. But the naval intelligence thought it was sabotage. Now at the time, the docks in New York was controlled by the mob. The Longshoremen's Union, the Teamsters, the fishing fleet, the fish markets, pretty much exclusively mob-run and Italian, mostly Italian immigrants. So naval intelligence figured, well, it's got to be sabotage because at the time Italy was aligned with Germany. And so they lost a whole big investigation. And what naval intelligence found out was that the people, especially the mob, were really the most ardent anti-fascist people anywhere. Because in Italy, in Mussolini's Italy, he wanted to just wipe out the mafia. Because as far as Mussolini was concerned, there was only one boss in Italy, and he was it. So this sub-government of the mafia, or the Camorra in Naples, had to go. And he used quite brutal means, torture, arrests, killings. So he was quite brutal in it, and the mob knew that. So what the naval intelligence found out was that the mob was not friends with Mussolini. So they decided to recruit them to make sure that the New York pier was safe. So they did, but they approached Frank Hogan, who was the district attorney from Manhattan, for his help to approach the unions and the mobsters on the pier. And they approached some of the mobsters, one of them being Sox, Lanza, and stuff, and other people. But what they found out was that, yeah, they'll cooperate, but they need Luciano's permission. The naval intelligence trusted Lansky because Lansky was Jewish, so they knew they can trust him against Hitler. So Lansky was the middleman between naval intelligence and Luciano. So it was Lansky that recruited Luciano to help out, and he did. So the order went out: cooperate in any way you can. So there was never again any other sabotage. There was no work stoppages, no strikes, no nothing for the entire duration of the war. But they launched Project Underworld, which was to have the mob cooperate with naval intelligence. And so they recruited, naval intelligence recruited Italian-American naval officers. Some of those, quite an eclectic group of people were brought together, with different skills and everything. But also they spoke the various dialects of the Italian language, because that's another thing. All these immigrants who came to America didn't really speak Italian. They spoke their local dialects, because they came over pretty much uneducated. So whatever language they spoke Sicilian, they spoke Neapolitan, and these are kind of like almost unintelligible to Italian proper. So all these guys were, because they were the sons of immigrants, knew these dialects. And so with their help, especially the captain Marslow, who was in charge of this Project Underworld. So anyway, the docks were secure. Now, and that was with Luciano's help. So now when the United States and the Navy were planning their invasion, the United States was already in North Africa. Now they were going to use North Africa jumping point to Sicily and then into Italy. So they needed intelligence about Sicily, and because the Nazi troops were stationed in there. So the same people that were in charge of Project Underworld now were assigned to help the Navy in the Mediterranean waters off of Africa to spearhead the invasion of Sicily. And so they had to interrogate all the people of Sicilian backgrounds they could here in the States, the mobsters. Luciano was born in Sicily. And so that became Operation Husky. The invasion of Sicily was known as Operation Husky. So with all the intelligence they had gathered, and plus with their contacts on the island of Sicily, when the invasion started, they were quite successful, because they had so much information. They knew about where minefields were. They knew where the gun emplacements were. So it was really beneficial to the Navy to do that. So, but then it also continued up into Anzio and Salerno and those. So those guys who were the original members of Project Underworld and Operation Husky, they all got medals and everything. So they were quite instrumental in the success of the Italian campaign. So when the war was over, Luciano's lawyers petitioned Dewey, who now was the governor of New York, to pardon Luciano. So Governor Dewey went to the New York State Department of Corrections Clemency Board to run it by them. And so they looked at all the information they had at the time and decided, well, we will commute his sentence to the time served, but he's got to go. He's got to be, he's got to leave the country, because since he was born in Sicily, he was deported to Italy. So that's how he ended up there. I guess another background story to that, because Dewey did everything right. He himself didn't pardon Luciano. He went through channels. He went through the Frank Hogan. He went through the New York State Department of Corrections and the Clemency Board. And so he did everything right. And so, but the papers, the news media were accusing him of being bribed by Luciano to get early release from prison, and which it wasn't true. But so Dewey ran for the presidency, and he lost. You remember the paper. Dewey wins. In the Chicago Tribune, but actually, that was premature. I think that cost him the election. So he commissioned a judge to do a thorough investigation of Luciano's involvement in the mob involvement war. Dewey was completely, exonerated of that, but the report was buried and destroyed. All documents were destroyed, and none of that came out until 1977. So the story of Luciano and the mob helping the Allies never came out until 1977.